You're listening to Conversation Balloons, interviews with experts and friends about how the generations can help each other thrive. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Check out this episode. Today we have with us Tim Elmore, founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, and he's the author of over 35 books, including Habitudes, Images that Form Leadership Habits and Attitudes. He and his wife have 2 adult children, and he has trained leaders like the Nebraska Department of Education, Future Farmers of America National, University of Alabama Athletic Department, and Chick-fil-A. So right there, he must be doing a great job. We want to talk to him today about parenting teens. And we really thank you for coming on. I know you're busy, Tim, so we're so glad to have you.
It's my pleasure, Leah. Thanks for having me.
Well, in what ways are teens today different than kids were when their parents were growing up?
Yeah, great question. And I'll be the first to acknowledge, certainly there is an element of kids are kids. You know, teenagers are going to have certain struggles. Their brain is morphing during their adolescent years and doesn't fully form until 25, 26. So those things will be the same. They're going to be seeking out a steady identity, et cetera, et cetera. However, I think we'd all agree teens growing up today are growing up in a very different culture than the one you and I grew up in back in the 20th century. Can I say it that way? So I spent a lot of time collating data, and let me just share a few of the changes. So the millennials came into the workplace as young people, very confident, sometimes overconfident. You know, a boss might have needed to say, "Hey, Josh, you might not be the president of the company when you're 25 years old," you know, that sort of thing. Well, today, confidence has morphed into caution. Gen Z is much more cautious. And can you blame them? Look around you. We're still not quite done with this COVID-19 pandemic and the mental health issues that have grown as a result of it. So they're very, very cautious. The latest data I saw from the Barna Group said that 56% of Generation Z report that they tend to expect the worst in any given situation. Isn't that
Oh,
sad?
yes.
They tend to expect the worst. I can't imagine graduating from school going, "Yeah, I'm expecting the worst to happen here." But again, can you blame them? Look around you. So we're going to have to be people that coach them up and say, "Give it a shot. Give it a try. It's in you. I know it's in you to do this." So that's one change. Confidence is morphed into caution. Another change is that feeling special has morphed into feeling savvy. So you know this, we made the millennials feel very special back in the day. We gave them participation trophies and told them they were awesome for putting the fork in the dishwasher.
Uh-huh.
But feeling savvy is much more the preferred notion today. They feel savvy because they have grown up with a smartphone in their hand. And so they know things way earlier than I knew. I mean, think about, you know, when we started understanding the workplace and issues like sex and other things. Oh my gosh, they know this at 9 years old. It's kind of crazy, but it's very, very true. Here's another one: anticipation for the future has morphed into anxiety about the future. Anxiety levels are extremely high. Catch this: Dr. Robert Leahy, who is a cognitive behavioral therapist, said the average adolescent today experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s.
Oh, my.
I know, crazy. So this average teenager today would be in a psych ward if they were living 65 years ago. So sad. I think most parents don't even quite realize why they're so anxious. But think about this. This isn't the only reason, but the average teenager that's on social media today has 10,000 messages coming at them on any given day. Now, that's not just social media. That's social media, billboards, email, conversations, classroom time. I don't think our brains were hardwired to take in 10,000 messages every day. So they're overwhelmed with this. So if I'm a mom or a dad or a teacher or a coach, I got to lead with empathy. I'm not saying we don't build grit inside of them. We do, but we start with empathy. In fact, a simple 3-step process I follow is this is the leg we have to stand on. It spells the word leg. Listen, empathize, and then guide. Listen, empathize, and guide. Here's what this does. If I listen, they feel heard. I think everybody needs to feel heard. I don't think people have the innate need to get their own way, but I do feel they have the innate need to be heard.
Hmm.
Our sons and daughters have the innate need to be heard. And I think it's true to say when they feel heard, it is so close to feeling loved that for some it's almost indistinguishable.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, empathize. That means they feel understood. And I think most of them just don't feel understood.
Uh-huh.
So that's necessary. And then once we practice those first 2 steps, we have the right to say, could I offer some insight here? Maybe this might work, or maybe that might work.
Or have you tried?
Yes, or have you tried? Yeah, that's a great one. It's a question rather than a statement. But if you don't mind, I want to go somewhere that I have been captured by this thought recently. You know, we have seen protests from young people the last 2 years, especially, but the last 5 years, if you think about it, the March for Our Lives, the climate change thing, the Black Lives Matter. Even if you don't agree with all of this, you have to say, well, yep, we have seen young people marching
They've
and
taken to
demonstrating
the
for something.
streets.
Yes, they have. Just like in many ways, like the boomers did in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thought. Many psychologists, dating way back to Sigmund Freud, said that depression is suppressed anger. In many cases, not all, but many. I mean, sometimes depression is genetic, so it's not the only reason for depression. But in many cases, depression is suppressed anger. So if they're facing mental health issues, I wonder if it's anger that they just pushed down because they didn't have a healthy way to vent that anger. Maybe mom and dad weren't available to talk to them or listen to them. And so they just has this gnawing, low grade depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if some of the marching has been this venting where they're deconstructing the current realities. But I think it's dangerous to deconstruct unless you have a plan to reconstruct. For instance, let me just climb out on a limb here. Defund the police is not a good thing unless you got a reconstruction plan
Mm-hmm.
to do law enforcement. And we already have seen some cities that defunded it. And now, oh my gosh, crime rates have climbed.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe I'm going way out here, but I guess what I'm saying is maybe we need to be really good listeners before we're good leaders. And maybe that's where leading begins with the young people, because their ideas are not all going to work. Our ideas didn't all work. But if we listen, empathize, and guide, we earn the right to build that bridge, to have that conversation. And now we help them reconstruct what might need to be reconstructed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the first to admit my generation didn't do all the good ideas. We left some things undone. Civil rights is still not completely in order right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to be the coaches now that help them right the wrongs that they can right.
I heard you on another platform, on another podcast, talking about getting kids a vocabulary for their feelings. And
Yeah.
in that you talked about how a school developed a rating system for the kids'
Yes.
emotional states that they could just say, I'm a 7
Yeah.
right now, I need help or something.
Yeah.
But also,
Yes.
and I think a vocabulary for feelings that describes their feelings that can help them navigate those feelings and know that other
Yeah.
people have felt those feelings and they're not alone in those feelings, even though they feel overwhelming. Um, it's very powerful to name them, and I think without that ability, we have, what Thomas Hobbes called a world where life is solitary, nasty, brutal, and short.
Yes. Yes. You've nailed
I
it.
remember
Well, and this,
speaking to a class one time. I was teaching about police misconduct in a sociology class, and I just distinguished force and violence for them. And I said, violence is force used without authority. And they went,
mm,
Oh,
Yeah.
if you just make some distinctions and give them some handles, they can
Yes.
take those steps of thinking and making political and policy decisions that are
I
more
love that.
nuanced.
But you're right, vocabulary is key. One school I know of literally has a large table when students come in, and there are papers with words on them, angry, frustrated, impatient, and they get to pick the word, but they might not have it already up here, but choosing it gives them a handle for it.
Mhm.
Another school, high school, has red, yellow, and green colors when you're meeting online, like we're reading right now.
Mhm.
You can say, if it's red, it's I'm really not ready to talk. Would you mind if I just listen right now? Green is I'm totally ready, baby. Just give me a question.
Mhm.
But it gave them a chance to weigh in at the beginning, and the teacher could know kind of where their minds were. I think that's helpful. I really do.
Mhm. Um, Tell me what you think about what parents can do to deal with. I heard you say. Let's start. I heard you say once that kids right now are dealing. The main three problems are anxiety, which you mentioned, inferiority, which you mentioned a little bit, thinking about being overwhelmed, and shame.
Yeah.
How can parents address shame, which tends to silence kids and
Wow.
put them at a
Yes.
distance?
Yeah. Shame is such an awful, awful emotion. Yeah, Brene Brown, a research psychologist at University of Houston, has done some great work. Listeners, if you want to look her up, Brene, Brene Brown, is just marvelous. But I tell you, just speaking as a layman, I'm not a psychologist. My doctorate's in leadership, not psychology. But I tell you what, I found both of my kids have struggled a bit with depression. It is genetic. I mean, they were raised, it wasn't a perfect home, but very loving home, lots of laughter, plenty of food, nice clothes. Everything was pretty good. But they both struggle with it as young adults. And Pam and I, my wife and I, have been really astute learners of just sitting with them and listening. And knowing that here's this author dad that will listen to me and not just say, here's 6 steps to get out of that mess you're in, which I do have 6 steps, mind you. So that alone was good. But then here's another one in regard to shame. I remember my son was out in LA going to college, and he took a job in a very high end restaurant. I mean, when I say high end, it was very, very nice. The menus were huge, and star celebrities would come in. Uh, Jonathan was let go on his second day. He didn't have the menu memorized, and
Mm.
I know, and he talked when he was supposed to be quiet,
Mm.
and they let him go. Well, he was so ashamed, so embarrassed. He didn't call me.
Mm.
A couple of days later, his mama, my wife, Pam, said, Tim, Jonathan was let go, and he's just so embarrassed to call.
Oh.
Well, I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something. So I texted him first and I said, Jonathan, would love to chat when you get a free minute. And he sometime later said, yeah, I'm free. And so I called him. So I initiated mom and dad. And I said, Jonathan, mom just told me I am so, so sorry. But before you tell me about it, can I tell you about a wingnut, foul tip, bonehead thing I did when I was in college? And I was fired. I was fired from a job. But I think that made him feel so much better that I shared his
Uh,
shame. And I could share, oh my gosh,
mm.
and mine was way worse than his was. I mean, mine wasn't a high end restaurant. I wasn't able to handle the switchboard.
Mm.
It was so funny. But I think I evened the playing ground. It was equal now. It was level.
Uh-huh.
And here's this dad that he thinks has somewhat arrived. And oh my gosh, you too. And now he was able to go into it.
Hmm.
And
That's
at
beautiful.
that point, my job was just to listen now and just say, I know, I know.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah,
it
you
was good.
you can't
So
really be that shamed before somebody who is your equal and
yeah,
has
that's
also
true.
been broken. So
Yeah,
that's a
it's so
beautiful
true. Yeah,
approach.
yeah, yeah.
We certainly are hearing a lot about um, Gen Z, 18 to 25-year-olds walking away from the church and from faith,
Yeah.
from religions of all kinds. And I would like to explore with you how we can instill character in our
Yeah.
teens if they don't share our religious presuppositions
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a loaded question, Leah. You know that. And probably one that deserves more than 5 minutes
Yeah.
that we've got here. But let me throw out a couple of thoughts. One is I usually start with questions. When I see this moral dilemma where they don't maybe have an anchor of faith,
Mm-hmm.
but yet we all know you need ethics, values, morals, and law. Those are four things that every culture needs. Now, there's something different about all four of those. Um, I think law is a result of ethics and values. Morals can be very personal. Your morals may be slightly different than my morals, and we got to just allow people to be who they are. But ethics and values, now we need to, at least values, we need to come to a sameness on. And I think when I pose a couple of questions that I ask them about that, like for instance, Dr. Christian Smith at Notre Dame has discovered that 3 out of every 4 university students in America admit to cheating in order to get through college.
Yeah.
And often when I bring that up, they'll smile and nod and go, "Yep, I did too," or whatever. Um, I'll say, "Now, do you think that's going to be okay when they're running a company?" Now, just fast forward with me. They're running a company and they're cheating now on paychecks, perhaps
Or you're
on
doing
withholding.
airplane maintenance, or you're running
Yeah,
an
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
ICU unit.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You want a doctor ad libbing through your abdomen. So
Yeah.
I know that's kind of silly there, but they begin to see, oh my gosh, the stakes are higher now. It's not just a grade on a pop quiz. It's something much, much more. And then I begin to break down morals, values, ethics, and law. And I don't even get deep enough, but I just say we've got to come to a place where there's an agreed upon value. For me, my faith guides that, but you've got to come up with some compass. And then I talk about compass and GPS. So this is one of our habitudes. Habitudes are images that form leadership habits and attitudes. Think about a GPS and think about a compass. I remember when I first got a GPS on my phone, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'll never get lost the rest of my life. Well, that wasn't true. I was, I think less than a month later, I was up in some godforsaken place in Saskatchewan, Canada, where there were only dirt roads, no names on the roads, and you had to give directions with the red barn and the picket fence. So I had to get a compass on my phone, and a compass is very different. GPSs are good if you have names and addresses to plug in. If you're in new territory, foreign territory, and I've never been here before, I need a true north. And that's what I think our ethics become. That's what I think our values become. Whether or not it's the Bible or this or that, they've got to come to a place where they say, I've got a true north. And that's where we begin the conversation of, okay, what's your true north? What's going to be the guidelines or the core values that you derive your very direction from? And I remember talking to my son and daughter as they went off to college. What's going to be your compass? And they came up with words that would guide them on Friday night decisions that they had to make. You get the point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I would say we need to go with those young people that are deconstructing their faith and saying, I don't believe what you believe.
That's that's good. I think that's I think your habitudes. I really like these memes that you have that
Yes,
you
that
can
they are
latch
memes. Yeah,
onto, not just in an instructional setting, but at home with
yeah, yeah,
kids who are visual
yeah.
learners, especially. Um, well, let me pivot a little bit to thinking about uh, the academic, how we can coach our kids toward academic and workplace success. You talk about, oh, what was it? Hang on here.
Okay.
You talk about kind of a Cinderella syndrome, Can you
Yes.
tell the
Yes.
audience what that is and how parents can
Yeah.
deal with that?
Yeah. So I did a blog post on the Cinderella syndrome. It's certainly not every young person, and certainly it's not just for girls. When we talk about Cinderella, we often think that. It's that young person that has somehow either had parents that have overfunctioned and done too much for their kids rather than teach them, or they've just been in a place where they've not been coached or mentored, but they're expecting some adult to swoop in and save the day. So it's Cinderella looking for that Prince Charming or that, whatever prince, bringing the glass slipper or rescuing her from the wicked stepmother, that sort of thing. So that's the metaphor. Far too often, I think we've fostered that in children unwittingly. And I believe that sometimes, let me just paint a picture, sometimes mamas think to be a good mom, I've got to continue to do the laundry for my children until they go off to college. Well, if you do that, are they going to be ready to do laundry in college? We had our children doing their laundry freshman year of high school. And it wasn't because mom or dad couldn't do it or didn't want to do it. We wanted to equip them. And at first they thought it was awful because none of their friends did the laundry at, ninth grade. But boy, were they ready when they went off to, and my daughter went off to ORU, just like I did. And she was so ready for, Claudius Roberts, that sort of thing. Um,
Which is a
we
dorm
taught them
life, in other words.
that's
Right.
exactly right. Dorm life. Yeah. So when my son was 12 years old, and when my daughter was 12 years old, for that matter, I took them on a trip wherever they wanted to go. And we had fun for 3 of the 4 days of that trip. My son wanted to go up to the Mall of America in Minneapolis and go to Camp Snoopy. And at 12 years old, that was just the end all for him. On the last day, we got in our rental car and I drove up to a lake. It was Minneapolis. There are 10,000 lakes up there. So I found a lake that had a parking lot right close by. And I parked the car and I looked at Jonathan, who's just 12, in the passenger seat. And I said, Jonathan, I want to do something a little different now. And he looked at me a little scared and said, what are you talking about? And I said, I want to change seats with you in this car. I'm going to go around to the passenger side and you're going to come to the driver's side and you're going to drive this car. Well, he panicked. He said, Dad, that is illegal. That is illegal. That is illegal. And I said, Jonathan, we're not going to leave the parking lot. We won't drive out in the main road, but I want you to learn to drive this big machine right now.
Oh.
Next thing he said was, Dad, Mom will not like this. Mom is not going to like this. And I said, Jonathan, we don't have to tell your mother. We don't have to tell your mother. Well, it took me 10 minutes to talk him into it, but he finally came around to the other side of the car, sat down behind that big steering wheel, and I explained the ignition and the brake pedal and the accelerator and the gear shift. And after a little teaching period, he practiced what I preached. And I mean, he turned the car on and got big eyes when the car went on. And then he looked behind him and he started driving. Well, I mean, Leah, within 5 minutes, he's doing everything he's seen me do. He's backing up
Yeah.
and diagonal parking and parallel parking. And oh my gosh, it was wow. For 15 to 20 minutes, he drove that car and had a blast as a sixth grader.
Uh-huh.
Well, I finally said, okay, stop the car. He stopped the car. We got back into our original seats. And then I said, Jonathan, this is going to sound really cheesy, but just go with me on it, will you? I said, tell me how you felt when you first got behind the wheel of this car. And he went with it. He goes, oh, Dad, I was scared to death. I didn't think I could do it. I said, what did you just show me? He said, I guess I showed you I could do it. I said, that's exactly right. And Jonathan, that's exactly the feeling you're going to have becoming a man. You're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing and you can't handle all of this. It's too much responsibility. I said, Jonathan, you have it in you to be a driver, not a passenger in life. It's one of our habitudes. It's about ownership and responsibility. And I said, Jonathan, over the next several years, your body is going to be changing. Your view of girls is going to be changing. Your view of your parents is going to be changing. I said, but you have it in you to take each step. Just like you saw at 12 years old, you could drive a 2-ton vehicle. But we began to talk about this. And it was just an experience that he needed to. We've referred back to that conversation many times. he's out in LA again, and he's, oh my gosh, taking on responsibility and working jobs, but he has it in him to drive the car and not blame somebody else when he doesn't get to the destination he wants to get to. So I'll stop there, but I think those are the kinds of experiences we need to introduce to our kids, to say, you need to develop your compass, and you need to be a driver, not a passenger. You need to be a thermostat, not a thermometer in your relationships. You set the temperature.
Yeah, you're talking
Those
about
are the kinds of,
developing agency in these
yes,
kids.
that's exactly right. That's what we're talking about.
And
It's agency.
one thing I love about what you're doing here is you're showing us how to be an intentional parent. People
Yeah.
don't have to go
Yes.
out and imitate what you did with your son that day,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
the take home for me is give some time to designing a
Yes.
moment with your child
That's right.
with
That's right.
with intention and a goal behind it, and don't just react all the time,
Yes.
but you take the agency as a parent,
Yes.
and that will even
Yes.
give them an example to follow as well. It doesn't have to work out perfectly, but they will
Yes.
see that you are engaging
Take an
with
initiative.
them and
Yeah.
thinking and planning around them in a very beautiful way that in that
Yeah.
sense it can't fail, even if
I agree.
they
Any kid
drive
is going to
into the
appreciate, even if it's a
7-Eleven store.
messy experience. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. In fact, I've had so many parents, for instance, ask about this. We created a little resource. It's very cheap. It's $10, I think, or whatever, on our website. It's 52 experiences that you can do that would teach communication, responsibility, character, values. So yeah, that's it. That's on our website, and people are welcome to grab it and just to spark even better ideas of their own. Because you're right, you don't have to imitate mine, but maybe they'll spark ideas that you can do in your own home or your own neighborhood
Mhm.
with your own kids.
Well, one last topic that I have to hit is the use of phones, how parents should guide their kids in their use of social media, video games. How should a parent
Yeah.
attack those boundaries with all that, and also set an example?
Yeah. Great. Both of those are two huge
Yeah.
topics, setting an example and then parenting your kids. We talk to so many kids that would say, my mom's on her phone all the time. I never talk to her. That scares me, because mom, this is your chance. You've got a handful of years before they're off
Mhm.
as an adult. Take advantage of it. Couple of thoughts. Number one, I really highly recommend to type up an agreement
Hmm.
about your child's phone, a contract. Call it a contract.
Okay.
But it can be a one-page thing. I blogged about this. You can look it up on our blog page.
Uh-huh.
But it's where you just do an agreement, because 99% of the time, parents buy the first phone for their child. Their kids don't have the money to buy. So you can say, I bought this phone. I'm going to give it to you to use, but here are the guidelines. And they're going to sign that thing.
Hmm.
But the guidelines are very clear. And maybe we're going to put our phones in a basket at 9 p.m. We don't need to be on our phones after 9 p.m.
Mhm.
We're going to put our phones in a basket at 6 o'clock for dinner.
Mhm.
And, we're not going to be on, those kind of simple things, guidelines. But if you establish them up front, it's much easier to enforce them than coming up with them 5 years later when you wish you would have given them to them in middle school.
Mhm.
So phone contract is number one. Number two, if you allow them to get on social media platforms, there are numbers of apps you can get for your phone that allow you to track your child. Now, it doesn't make you a police officer, but it allows you just to see, are they on it 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day? What are they on?
Mhm.
So, and there's a number of them. I don't even recommend one, but look them up, that allows parents to track and monitor phone time and screen time. And then lastly, this is data that's really helpful. Dr. Jean Twenge at San Diego State University did a meta-analysis about social media and teenagers. And here's what she found that was magical. She found out that a teenager that spends 2 hours or less on social media is far less vulnerable to anxiety and depression. Once you go above 2 hours, you become tangibly and measurably more vulnerable to anxiety and depression. It's like once you go above 2 hours, you start feeling the feelings of anxiety, depression. It's just crazy.
Mm.
So I would just say, talk to your young person, your child, your teen, and say, sweetheart, can I share some statistics with you? I know you're not into numbers, but here's some statistics. If you want peace of mind, you can control that.
Mm.
Just set an alarm for yourself on your phone and get off, or give it to me. My own son, when I shared this with him, he goes, I'm cutting back on social media. He was no dummy. He said, I'm going to cut back. And it was his decision, not mine. So I'll stop there. But that's just been really helpful to me to know that.
That's beautiful. I think that's a great practical idea too. I remember when my
Yeah.
kids were young and TV was the temptation for them at the time, although they had
Yeah.
computers. But I got this strong thought in my mind: don't give them entertainment, give them yourself. And so I
Yes.
started really trying to think of ways and engage with them to give
Yeah.
them myself, and
I love it.
to really interact with them in a personal way, and play with them and
Yeah.
alongside them and challenge them myself. And um, it's
I
very
love it.
gratifying. And I read some study that said even if a person sees that you have a cell phone within reach, they perceive
Yes.
you
Yeah.
as less engaged and interested in them
Yes.
as if the cell phone was not visible. That's
Yes.
amazing.
It's so
I
true.
mean,
It is.
mhm.
And it's distracting, even if it's in earshot or eyesight. It's distracting alone.
I had
So,
a
yeah, I think,
Yeah, yeah, it is true. Yeah, it distracts me, and apparently the person I'm with is distracted by my cell phone, even if
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
operating. Um,
it's so true.
I had a cousin who was a very famous advertising magnate. He won many Clio awards, and uh,
Wow.
Hal Riney. He designed the "It's Morning Again in America" campaign and the Saturn
Oh, yeah.
campaign, and we went to visit him one time, and he had two little kids at home, and we had our kids there, and we were going to go to lunch and leave the children, and I said, you can, you know, play a video or something, the caretaker can play something for them. And he said, my kids don't watch TV. And he was a
Wow.
television advertiser, and I said,
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
um, do you uh, do you watch TV? I mean, that's your field. That's what. And he said, no, that's not where the ideas come from.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That reminds me of Steve Jobs when he came out with the iPad, and the New York Times interviewed him and said, I bet your kids love this iPad. And he goes, oh, I don't give this to my kids. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the guy that made them isn't letting his kids on them.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So true. Well, this has been really fun, Tim, and I know it will be helpful to many parents. And where can people find you?
Yes, probably the simplest place to find me is growingleaders.com. That's our website, and my email's there, and blog pages and books, growingleaders.com. And yeah, in fact, that resource I mentioned, 52 leadership ideas or experiences, can be found there. But Leah, so good to be with you. It's always fun to talk to you. You're a very intelligent lady that I love talking to.
Well, I've got you fooled. Maybe I can keep my audience fooled too. Thanks a million. And we just want to encourage everyone to subscribe, rate, and review us at Conversation Balloons, and we will talk to you next time. Bye bye. Thanks for listening to Conversation Balloons. Look for more episodes and information at leahfarish.com. That's LEAHFARISH.com. And follow me on Facebook and Instagram.